The Nigerian financial industry entered a new phase this week as the new Central Bank of Nigeria Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, was inaugurated into office, making him the 10th indigenous governor in the history of the Apex Bank. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwagwum. Mr. Godwin Emefiele arrived at the CBN headquarters at 7:30 a.m. on Tuesday, June the 3rd, to the warm embrace of the 4 deputy governors of the bank and staff, led by Dr. Mrs. Sarah Alade, whose tenure as acting CBN governor ended on Monday, June the 2nd. There wasn't much ceremony. However, the new CBN governor addressed a press conference on Thursday, June the 5th, where he reeled out his agenda both for the monetary policy and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Do stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Prior to Mr. Emefiele's resumption as the CBN governor, there were a lot of expectations from him. Interestingly, those expectations are not far from what he says his agenda is. At his first media briefing, Mr. Emefiele says he will pursue a gradual reduction in interest rate, maintain a stable exchange rate, and manage potential threats to external reserves. He also hopes to build a professional central bank that is apolitical and people-oriented. He also promises to build a resilient financial system. Let's listen to him.
In order to realize Central Bank of Nigeria's vision, therefore, I believe we must start with championing policies that promote sustainability of our hard-earned macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability. Monetary policy. On monetary policy, we shall pursue a gradual reduction in interest rates. A comparison of selected macroeconomic aggregates from some emerging market countries, including South Africa, Brazil, India, China, Turkey, Malaysia, indicate that Nigeria has one of the highest treasury bill rates. Such high rates create a perverse incentive for commercial banks to simply buy virtually risk-free government bonds rather than lend to the real sector. To enhance financial access and reduce borrower cost of credit, we will pursue policies targeted at making Nigeria's treasury bills rates more comparable with other emerging markets and, by extension, pursue a reduction in both deposit and lending rates. While a reduction in deposit rates will encourage investment attitudes in savers, a reduction in lending rates would make credit cheaper for potential investors. The bank would also begin to include the unemployment rate as one of the key variables considered for monetary policy decisions. In the interim, we would continue to maintain a monetary policy stance reflecting the liquidity conditions in the economy, as well as the potential fiscal expansion in the run-up to the 2015 general elections. Exchange rate policy. Our key goal under exchange rate policy will be to maintain exchange rate stability. In view of the high import-dependent nature of our economy and significant exchange rate pass-through, a systematic depreciation of the naira would literally translate to considerable inflationary pressure with attendant effect on macroeconomic stability. Therefore, under my leadership, the bank will continue to focus on maintaining exchange rate stability and preserve the value of the domestic currency. We will sustain the managed float regime in the management of the exchange rate, as this will allow the bank to intervene when necessary to offset pressures on the exchange rate. To support this strategy, we will strive to build up and maintain a healthy external reserve position and ensure external balance. There is no doubt that reducing interest rates and maintaining exchange rate are very daunting twin goals. However, the CBN would work assiduously with all stakeholders to devise countervailing measures that will ensure that these goals are mutually achieved. Financial system stability. We hope to sustain the effective management of potential threats and avoid systemic crisis. The core of my vision is to effectively manage potential threats to financial stability and create a strong governance regime that is conducive for financial intermediation, innovative finance, and inclusiveness. In this regard, we hope to anchor on two main pillars: managing factors that create liquidity shocks and zero tolerance on practices that undermine the health of financial institutions. In order to achieve these goals, we would, 1, work with the relevant stakeholders to aggressively shore up reserves. We hope to engage the fiscal and political authorities as well as other stakeholders to improve our policy buffers, which will further create space for the bank to implement monetary policy using its limited instruments.
Mr. Godwin Emefiele speaking as the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Well, just before that media briefing by Mr. Godwin Emefiele, I had a conversation with an economist, Dr. Biodun Adedipe, on what possibly could be Mr. Emefiele's agenda, just to preempt his briefing. Dr. Adedipe believes he will focus more on development banking, which is a key mandate of the Central Bank. And that, again, is not far from what Mr. Emefiele wants to do. We will take a short break now, and when we come back, we will get to listen to Dr. Biodun Adedipe.
Now, primarily, I will take it from the first indication he gave when he was going through the process of, the approval. And that was to say it will focus on development banking, which is a key aspect of the mandate of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And if he does that, that means he's looking at it from the perspective of, one, we've had an economy that has been growing very strongly over the last 11 years thereabout, consistently growing above 6% per annum in its gross domestic product. But over that period also, we've had a challenge of growth without development. So if he focuses in his agenda on that, it will be in line with what Nigerians will expect from the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is how do we convert this growth advantage of so many years into real development.
If he is to focus on development banking, does that mean that he's likely going to bring down the benchmark interest rate that has been up at 12% for a very long time?
Now, in my very considered and very strong opinion, I think that should be one of the key elements of his agenda. Because having the monetary policy rate at 12% for close to almost 4-5 years now, close to 4 years, since 2011. We've been on this now. And it means that essentially what you are saying is that there is less consideration for growth. And when you also consider the history of the Nigerian economy, over the years, in fact, maybe I will say decades, the concern had been that the rate of interest has been very high. And that also had meant, one, the cost of credit very high, and then secondly, that created a bottleneck in terms of access. And if there's no access, that means even if it's available, and that's a major issue he also has to contend with, availability of credit points to the fact that there's liquidity in the system. Okay? So insofar as the rate of interest is that high, the likelihood is that that liquidity will not convert into credit. And I expect that it's an area we want to give attention to. And even more importantly, the policy implication of that rate, which is that it is a signal rate. Any direction it takes it to is a signal to the banks as to what to do with their own rates as well. So if we desire a single-digit interest rate, as we have always said in Nigeria, then I expect that his agenda will have a strategy on how to deal with that issue.